All right, well, welcome everyone to our Kidlit Distancing Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of the Children's Book Insider newsletter, co-creator of writeforkids.org and writingblueprints.com. Often John is here, my partner and husband, but he is out grocery shopping. So I am very excited. Oh, there he is on his phone. Oh, you haven't left yet. So you made me a liar. Okay. I'm not sure we heard you on the, I heard you from the living room. I don't know if your volume came through. Okay. He says hi. I'm really excited to have Brian Weisfeld here in a few minutes to talk about his particular books and his mission of creating young entrepreneurs, especially girls. So that is going to be really great. But let's do a few fun things first. If you're new to us, welcome. And if you want to get on our list to get notified every week for this distancing social, you can go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. It'll get you on our list, and also you will get a free ebook which compiles lots of information that we have learned over 30 years of doing this. And it's a really great reference, especially if you're new to writing children's books. So if you're new to us, welcome, and go ahead and get on our list, and then you'll be notified of everything that we do. And also, if you are not a subscriber to our newsletter, Children's Book Insider, we are celebrating our 30th year of publication this year. And you can subscribe for $5 a month. It's a special deal just for our socialites. And you will get a monthly newsletter and also access to our children's writing knowledge base on the CBI Clubhouse, which has decades of information on it. Categorized lots of different ways so you can find what you're looking for. So it's writeforkids.org/CBI. So where in the world are you? If you're new, we often do a Where in the World is Laura, and I put up a slide behind me here of some literary landmark around the world. But I've been asking our viewers to send in pictures. So I have a cool one tonight, and you get to guess. Where in the world is Deborah Doherty? So let's see if you can guess where, sure, where this is. It's literary themed, clearly a lovely park of some sort, hanging out with Oscar Wilde there. So let me see in the chat box. Give me some guesses where you think this might be. Central Park? Nope, Sheila, not Central Park. It's obviously a nice, a lovely park somewhere. Oscar Wilde gives you a great clue. And you see on this display on the right, Dublin. Yes, Sharon, it is in Dublin. Good job. So this is the Marion Square in Dublin, Ireland. And it's a lovely park in a lovely city, and I've been there and I want to go back right now. So this is in springtime, very pretty. So thank you for sending that in. I enjoyed seeing those pictures from one of my favorite places in the world. So you have an opportunity to participate in the social. And by the way, if you want to be in the picture, that's cool. You don't have to be, but we love seeing you. So take a picture of yourself in front of a literary landmark or somewhere that inspires your writing, or you're something that you're doing some writing related thing, and you can email it to me with the photo and permission to use it at mail@writeforkids.org and put Where in the World in the subject line, and I will feature you on a future Kidlit Distancing Social. So now we've got a couple amazing celebrates this week. This is where we celebrate the successes of you. So Nancy Pinn's debut picture book, Fly Girl Fly, Shasta Wise, sorry, I meant to look up how to say her name and I forgot. Shasta Wise Soars Around the World was released just this past Tuesday from Beaming Books. It is the only authorized picture book biography about the first woman from Afghanistan and the youngest female to fly solo around the world in a single engine plane. Now, here's a really cool thing. To celebrate, Nancy's local bookstore, Cover to Cover, is hosting a virtual book launch party this coming Saturday. And Shasta Wise, I'm sorry, I'm sure I'm saying your name wrong, will be joining from her home in Dubai. So you can join that virtual book launch and hear the author and the subject of this amazing book have a conversation about this book. So here's the link to go join that virtual book launch on the screen here. You can also go to cover2coverchildrensbooks.com and click on events, if that's easier for you to remember. Cover2coverchildrensbooks.com and click on events, and you can join in that virtual book launch, which is awesome. And I love the cover of that book. And Joanna Lemke's debut middle grade book, Enemy Under Our Roof, a childhood memoir from the Nazi-occupied Netherlands, was published in July by Friesen Press. And this novel slash memoir, it's fictionalized, but it's based on her life, on her own experiences in war-torn Angelo during World War II, intersperses the narrative with short history lessons that give modern readers a context for the events. So that is an awesome, awesome book. It's kind of upper middle grade, and I saw that manuscript in its early stages when I was doing manuscript critiques, so I know what a deeply personal, moving story this is. And I want to thank Joanna for putting in her author bio that she is a member of CBI. I just thought that was so cool, and I was very touched by that. So Joanna, congratulations. I know this was a long labor of love for you, and I am so happy to see this book in print. So send us your good news. You can email us at writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line, and we will feature you on a future distancing social. And as I like to remind you every week, it does not have to be a book publication. You can have finally found a great critique partner. You can have finished a first draft of your manuscript. You could have gotten a great idea that you're really excited about. All of those things are worth celebrating. So we want to help you celebrate. So I need to hear about it. Mail at writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line. And trust me, I love seeing these. They make my week. So you need to send me some celebrations. Okay, a couple great links of interest this week. This is an awesome blog post from Jane Friedman's blog, A Writer's Guide to Fair Use and Permissions, plus a sample permissions letter. And this explains when you need to get permission to quote or excerpt from someone else's work, and defines what fair use means. And a lot of people ask me these questions, especially if you're writing nonfiction or you're writing an article for a magazine and you want to quote a source or pull a couple lines from one of your sources to quote within the article. Can you do that? Do you need permission? This is your resource right here. And she also gives you a sample letter if you are writing to someone to ask for their permission to excerpt from their work in your work. So I created, oh no, here's your direct link, janefriedman.com/sample-permission-letter. It's an excellent, excellent article. And then, you know, I've talked a lot about the Writer Beware blog and how Victoria Strauss has been following up on publishing scams. This is a new one. Dissecting a Scam, Fact and Fiction, Entertainment and Literary Agency. This is a scam literary agency that's contacting authors and saying they want to represent their work and sell their work to Hollywood. So this article, this post in particular, really explains how she figured out this was a scam. And it's very useful for you to read so that you will be able to spot other scams. So I made a bit.ly link for you, bit.ly/fact and fiction scam. And just as a rule of thumb, publishers and agents don't normally contact aspiring authors out of the blue and say, hey, send me your manuscript. I want to represent you. Usually you have to be the one initiating the contact. So that should be sending you a red flag right there if you get any of those emails. Okay, now I get to introduce my guest. So Brian Weisfeld helped build some world-class brands and companies, including IMAX and coupons.com. And he created hundreds of jobs in the process. But it was spending time with his two daughters that inspired his latest efforts, which he considers his most important work up to date. He, Brian is the founder and chief squad officer of the Startup Squad, an initiative dedicated to helping girls reach their potential and follow their dreams, whatever their passions are. This middle grade series, published by Macmillan, has gotten great reviews from Kirkus and endorsements from such legendary authors as Katherine Applegate and Anne Martin, who wrote The Babysitter's Club, among other things. These are both award-winning authors. So, and it currently has 3 titles out, which you can see here. And the back of each book features tips from the Startup Squad and an inspirational profile of a girl entrepreneur. But I want to show you a couple pages from inside the website before Brian comes on, because I also think this is an amazing example of a website for a series or an author, you know, just your author website. But there's some great stuff. But we're going to talk about this series and how it all connects around one mission. But within the website, you have pages like stuff you need, downloadable tips and tools for girlpreneurs and those who love them. So all of these resources that girls can download to help start up their own business, which is great. And then another page I love, These Girls Mean Business. This is the Girls Mean Business Gallery, where you get to meet and greet and see young business owners who are all girlpreneurs, and you can hear their stories, see their businesses, and shop for their products. So this is a very innovative concept here. And so that's why I'm so excited to have Brian come speak with us. So Brian, why don't you come on screen with me? Hello,
everyone.
Welcome to the Kidlit Distancing Social.
Well, thanks. Oh, sorry, please.
Nope, go ahead.
No, I'm just so excited. First of all, I was reading, you know, where everyone's from, and you've got people from all around the world. And so that's just super cool to see someone up at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And also as a subscriber to the Children's Book Insider, as I was going through this process, now that we've come full circle, and to be here is also very cool. So I'm excited. I'm going to try to control myself.
That's right. I completely forgot to put that in your intro, but yay. Yeah. That's just even better. So I'm just very excited to see you here tonight, to have you here tonight. I'm sorry, and I'm having trouble speaking today, obviously. I think I've just been locked in the house too long, along with everybody else in the world. So why don't we get started by telling us, why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of what inspired you to create this series and to take this huge leap from businessman to children's book author?
Well, as you said, I've spent my career helping entrepreneurs scale and build their businesses.
Mhm.
So I had left coupons.com, my last job, and I was just looking for the next company to grow and scale. But I have two daughters. They're now 14 and 12. So at the time, my oldest daughter was 8. And I watched her try to sell Girl Scout cookies and run a charity bake sale with a lot more enthusiasm than idea about how to actually market and sell the
Mhm.
product. And actually, my wife was the one that said to my daughter when she was selling, hey, you got to say good morning to people when they walk by, and make sure you look people in the eye when you talk to them. And when she was doing the charity bake sale, my wife said, tell people the money goes to charity, because even if they don't want to buy a brownie, maybe they'll still give you a few bucks.
Mhm.
And I actually really didn't think much of it at the time, other than realizing that, wow, these are life skills that my daughter is learning by selling Girl Scout cookies and running this bake sale. But probably about a month or two later, on a Sunday morning, I was laying in bed reading books with my girls. My older daughter was on my right side, and she was reading Who Was Queen Elizabeth from the Who Was series, which I just think are so well done. My younger daughter was on my right side. She was in kindergarten, so I was reading to her. And as fate would have it, the book she wanted me to read to her that day was like the 57th book of the Rainbow Fairy Princess Unicorn series.
Mhm.
And I just got tired of people talking down to girls. I just wanted there to be more empowering influences for my daughters. And while, look, I give the Rainbow Princess Unicorn Fairies a ton of credit, because, look, it absolutely helps her imagination. It makes her want to learn how to read. That's great. But my older daughter was getting the exact same benefit while she was learning about Queen Elizabeth. And so for some reason, I don't know why, but those two experiences combined in my brain. And I said, I'm going to create this novel series to get girls interested in entrepreneurship, to get them excited about opening up that first lemonade stand or bake sale, and just to get them to start to think like an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Not that like every girl should grow up to be an entrepreneur, but I just feel so strongly that girls that have that entrepreneurial mindset, that are comfortable with risk and comfortable with failure, and they see opportunities instead of problems, and they learn those social skills and how to talk to strangers and how to develop that self-confidence. Girls with those skills will be more successful in life regardless of the path they choose. And so that was the idea. And I'm a business guy, not a writer, and I didn't think I'd be the person to write the series at the end of the day, but I knew I had to learn about the industry and learn how to write and create that first manuscript to be able to show people what I was all about. So actually, one of the first things I did is I went out and I bought Writing Children's Books for Dummies, and it's a fantastic book. I learned a ton from it, but it also helped me get into the mindset of being a dummy. Like, I was starting from scratch, and there's going to be a ton of rejection and a ton of failure along the journey.
Mhm. Great, great. Well, you were smart to start with that book, which, by the way, I don't know if you looked on the copyright. I'm the technical editor of that book.
No way.
Yeah, my
So
name just appears on the copyright page in a little tiny
that
type, but
Well,
yeah.
that's really funny, because the other thing that just happened recently was somehow I got connected, or I found online, maybe she had posted somewhere, Lisa Rajani,
Mhm.
who is I guess the writer.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to her just to say thank you for doing it, and just to share the story of how much impact it had on my ability to do it. So that's funny that
Yeah.
around to that. That's great.
6 degrees of separation, all of us in the children's book field.
Yeah, clearly.
So this series is fiction, even though you have a lot of real world, information in there, but it is stories that you're teaching through stories. So you have this underlying sort of message and passion that you want to convey through these stories. How do you create these stories without sounding preachy or heavy-handed or lecturing to your readers?
Yeah, that's the most important and the hardest part. And to your point about that it's fiction. So my goal here is to inspire and empower girls to open up that first lemonade stand. And while it would have been a lot easier for me to do nonfiction, the girls that were interested in picking up a nonfiction book about entrepreneurship, they've already got bitten by the bug. What
Mhm.
I wanted to do was, how do I get girls who never thought about being an entrepreneur to open up a book and say, you know what, that sounds like fun. I want to start my own lemonade stand. And so we knew it had to be a fun book story of great characters that stood on its own. Just that's something that kids would want to pick up and read. And we're very purposely in the narrative, very light on the business stuff. We're much heavier on the school issues and family issues and pets and plot and all that other stuff. But in the back of the book, we do have a nonfiction section, and we refer back to the narrative. So we say, hey, when the girls were making a big sign for their lemonade stand, that's called marketing. And here are some tips you can use to run your business. And so just sort of, quickly, so this is the back of the book. And these are business tips based upon not only my work, but also I reached out to the heads of the entrepreneurship programs at at Stanford and University of Michigan's business schools to ask for help with those tips. And so that's the idea, is that they get excited about running a lemonade stand or starting a business, and then we give them some tips to be able to do a better job of it. And so that baking, I refer to it as you got to bake the broccoli into the brownies. Because if the kids, a kid smells they're being taught or there's a lesson in there, they're done. Like, they won't read another page. And so that's the hardest part. And so for me, it was two things. One was just a lot of testing. The first time I handed a manuscript to my oldest daughter to read, when she was, I guess, 9 at the time, I didn't tell her I had written. I told her a friend of mine wrote it because I wanted to get honest feedback. But I think the title was the working title was Harriet Martin and the Lemonade Stand. And then under it said, A Kid's Primer for Business. And I remember this. I was sitting in my car and I reached back, I handed it to my daughter, and she looked at it and she said, business? This is about business? And I went, oh, no, don't worry about it. Like, I knew right away you can't use the word business. Like, that was the first lesson. And the business tips I had woven, like at the end of each chapter, I used to have the business tips. And what I found, I had probably 200 beta reader girls and fill out surveys for me. And one of the things they said was they just wanted to read the story. They weren't paying attention to that. But I think it's so important for kids. You can teach a kid about marketing, and they may or may not retain it. But if you can combine that left brain and right brain thinking, and a kid will read a story about a girl who made a sign for her lemonade stand that's so big she couldn't even carry it down the street, and then you tell her that's marketing, she'll remember that. Mm-hmm. And so that's the baking the broccoli and the brownies is so important. And what I did was I wrote the original manuscript, the 42,000 word manuscript that I used to get the original book deal. But once I signed with Macmillan, we said, all right, forget what I wrote. How would you do it? Because my goal is to reach and impact girls. My goal wasn't necessarily to see my words on the page. And so we started from scratch, and we, created plots and characters and all that sort of stuff. And then we brought in my co-author, Nicole, who had just finished, I got her book here too, had just worked with the same imprint at Macmillan and had just finished a series called The Fix-It Friends. Mm-hmm. And The Fix-It Friends is all about social emotional learning, but the same thing, it's fiction, and then there's some nonfiction in the back. And I think better than anything I had ever read up to then, she did a great job of baking the broccoli into the brownies. And so we brought her on board. And so I knew this is probably something we were going to talk about. And I wanted to get her perspective, because frankly, she's the one that is doing the job of baking the broccoli and the brownies. And I said to her, what can I share to a webinar of aspiring writers? So forgive me, I'm going to read this.
Sure.
This is from Nicole, who has now written, I guess, 9 books that have some sort of theme to them. She said, kids are inquisitive and want to learn about all sorts of subjects, but it's easier to engage when that learning is done in the context of the story. So that left brain, right brain thing. It's easier to comprehend if the lesson has some relation to the characters that the reader cares about and a plot in a world that they're invested in. So she said, I try to translate jargon into accessible language without dumbing it down, just to make it less technical, and tried to be sparing with how much I put in at one time. To overuse the broccoli metaphor, she chops it up finely so they don't get a whole mouthful at once. So that's from Nicole. But as I said, that's the hardest part, is you got to make sure that you're not giving a lesson. And the way that we decided to do it was pull 90% of the lesson out of the narrative and just put it in the back of the book.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. And I want to circle back to you bringing this to Macmillan. But before I forget, Um, my other thought I had while you were talking is how you came up with this idea and then you approached it as a business person. You had a focus group, you listened to their feedback, you adjusted the product according to what the customer said they wanted from you. That's a very different way of creating a book that most writers would be like, oh no, you know, this is my vision and the kids are just going to have to love it, you know. And I think that's interesting because ultimately a book is a product that you are creating and you want to get your customers to buy it. And so you had to find that balance between the pure creative process and yet distancing yourself from that, taking your ego out of it and letting the kids tell you what wasn't working and listening to them. So was it hard for you to kind of take your, as a writer, take your ego out of it and start hearing that feedback?
So there's a lot in there. So
Yeah.
a couple of things. First of all, this was the hardest and most humbling thing I've ever tried to do in my entire career, by far. And some of the feedback that I got was really hard to listen to. And as I said, I took it from 10-year-old girls. I won't go into detail right now, but I actually did a TEDx on the concept of inspiration. And I tell some of the stories about the rejections and the things that I had to overcome. So if anyone's interested, just search on TEDx Weisfeld and you'll find it and you can take it. So, but no, unquestionably, you know, that the rejection and the feedback on, you know, what I had created. And the hardest thing, this is really funny, the hardest thing was as a business person, I guess that's a left brain person my entire life. This is the first time I'd exercised my right brain since, you know, I was a kid. And so I'll tell you a funny story. So I used to live in New York. I live in Silicon Valley now. And while I was working on this, I was still looking for, you know, other companies to help grow and scale. And so when it came time for me to share the manuscript for the first time, I only sent it to friends of mine in New York because I was afraid that it would be so embarrassing, it would impact my ability to get a job in Silicon Valley. So I wanted 2,500 miles of distance between the two when I first started. And so, but also, yeah, I came at this, as I do everything else, from a business perspective. That's just how I was trained. That's how I think, which has led to some really interesting conversations between myself and my editorial team and my agent. They're like, yeah, no one's ever asked me that before because I think of it differently. And so, yeah, you know, I started by saying, what's the foundation of what I'm trying to create? What's my vision? What's my mission? What's my strategy? And then what is the look and feel of this brand? What is this all about? And so I went, you know, before we had the book, I had designed the logo and the color palette that we wanted to use and the language that we wanted to use with the brand and the look and the feel of everything that we did with the brand. As a matter of fact, I'm going to sneak a peek. I know it looks like a nice, pretty background, but these are just my posts behind me. On my wall, this is sort of my home office. I have here, this is like the original, you know, the color palette and some of the test stuff that we had created for the Startup Squad to test different looks and feels and things and feel like that. So, you know, I came at it from that business perspective and, you know, I created quarterly goals for myself. Of different things I wanted to accomplish. And every quarter I go back and I look at those goals and I rate myself on how did I do. So that business focus has always been important to me as I've at the same time exercised this creative side.
So you did all this work about creating the look of it, and then you took all of that information to Macmillan when you proposed the series to them. Is that how that happened?
So I wrote the manuscript. We sold it to Macmillan, got the book deal. And then once I got the book deal, while I was working with Macmillan on essentially recreating the story in the books, then I went and I started focusing on the logo and the palette and those sorts of things, because I
Mhm.
brought in someone from the outside and I didn't want to really spend the money on that until I knew
Mhm.
I had something that was where, I knew that it was going to be some payoff.
Right.
But things like the vision and the mission, though, that I started from the very beginning because I
Mhm.
wanted to make sure that what we created was true to it. And that first meeting with Macmillan, and frankly, our first meeting with Nicole as well, I started the meeting by sharing with them the vision, my mission, and the strategy of what we're trying to create. And what was important, what did the brand say? What was the Startup Squad? And the Startup Squad is about strength. It's about being feminine, but not girly. It's about being fun, but not too young, because I hate when things talk down to kids.
Mhm.
And so being able to establish up front what the brand meant and what the Startup Squad was able what was going to say and how it was going to say it helped us make sure that we shaped the story in the right way. And even now, I'm still sort of the shepherd of the brand. So the
Mhm.
way I work with Macmillan, and my journey is going to be very different from a lot of other people, is I'll spend months working with the editorial team at Macmillan creating an outline for each of the books. So we'll create a 6-page outline, act 1, act 2, act 3, and what are the business lessons we want to weave in, and who's the primary protagonist and the secondary protagonist. And then we share that with Nicole. And amazingly, in 3 months, she sends us back 24,000 words.
Hmm.
And then Macmillan and I get involved and we edit, we go back and forth with Nicole, and that's how we do it. And so to say, like, I'm the shepherd of the brand, an example is in one of the first drafts we got back of one of the books, a lot of the characters would, like, we'd have one of the girls talking to the other girls trying to calm them down, and she'd be like, guys, wait. And I was like, no, we don't say guys. We're talking to 3 girls here, and even a mixed gender crowd. We're not using the term guys. We're all about strong women and empowering women. So it's, hey everyone, or whatever it happens to be. And so I'm still very focused on making sure that every word on the page is consistent with the brand and creating strong characters.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And again, the idea of, really thinking about what the brand is and coming up with those keywords that you want to represent the brand and doing that early on in the process, I think is so important. Would you think, if, say, an author is not writing a series, but they have several different books that they are creating, all different topics, is it important for them to sort of identify their brand as an author up front that helps kind of uh, create a foundation for everything they do that can also help communicate on their website, their blog? Do you think it's as important for an author who's not creating a series to also think about their brand?
So 2 things. One is, I think it is important to know what your style is. Like, what do you do?
Mhm.
There's I probably could have gotten 8 pages into this and known it was a Catherine Applegate book, right? I mean, each authors have a style, even though she's writing about a lot of different things. So I think, what is your style, and when someone picks up a book with your name on it, what's going to be consistent through all those books? The stories may be totally different, but there's going to be some thread. But I also think you could almost think of it as each of your characters has their own brand, right?
Mhm.
I've created, probably one of the things I learned from reading the Children's Book Insider was creating who is my character. When my character wakes up in the morning, what's the first thing they do? What goes in their backpack? What do they wear? What do they look like? What do they like? What do they don't like? What are they allergic to? What's their favorite pet? What's their favorite animal? What's the color? Those sorts of things. And so each of your characters has a brand. And so then when you're writing the story, you immediately know when something is just, no, that's off brand. That's not what that character would do. And so I think it's, you can look at it holistically as who you are as an author, but I think also the different pieces of each of your books can have that sense of brand as well.
Sure, sure. And then it's much easier for other people to talk about your books because they have these 3 or 4 keywords that sort of represent you or your book. And that's how word of mouth gets started. And that's what reviewers pull out when they're writing about your book. So it's important on so many levels. And I mentioned your website. when I was introducing you, which I just love. And I said, everybody should go study it just to get all these great tips on how to create a website. But again, it all holds together. You go there, you immediately know what it's about. Every page on it just adds to that concept that we see on the homepage, and it all holds together so beautifully. And I immediately know who you are, what's important to you, because of the brand. And I just think it's wonderful. So clearly you put a lot of thought into it, and it really shows, I think, in the design of the
Well,
website.
thank you. Yeah, I think, I think that you ultimately want someone to be able to look at it without knowing what the URL is and say, oh, that's a startup spot. It just, or if not, then it's, this, I know, they know what they're getting when they look at it, and everything ties together. The books and the teacher's guide and the website, and it's all one common theme. And I think that's really important from a business perspective. And thanks for, noticing that it carries through to the website.
Yeah. And the page with the young girlpreneurs, their businesses they've started, that must be very gratifying for you to just keep hearing from these girls who have started businesses.
These girls are incredible, and I'll and it's what keeps me going. So I'll tell two quick stories. One is for my book launch, we actually had a girlpreneur market. I had like 25 girls there selling their products. Because anytime we can reflect the spotlight of the brand onto these amazing girls, it was something we wanted to do. And so with this one girl who was selling these, it could have been a boutique in any city. It was, she had candles and candle holders. She had these tie-dye shirts and totes, and she had these soaps in different shapes and colors, and it was incredible. And I said to her, I was like, this can't be your first business. I mean, this stuff looks great. And she said, no, it's my second. And I said, oh, what was your first business? And she said, well, I had a lemonade stand once. And her mom was there. And I said, how do you go from a lemonade stand to this? And she said, you spoke at her school.
Wow. Wow.
And I get chills telling that story. These girls are incredible. And so we have videos of 70 different girls, all between the ages of 7 and 15, who started their own businesses. Everyone from girls who are just starting out to we've got one girl who was just the youngest person ever to be on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine. And they're amazing. And I have to show you my favorite business. Sorry. It's a little off topic, but this is great. That's so okay. There's a girl named Reese in Virginia who's realized that a lot of kids, when they get finished playing with their stuffed animals, they either throw them away or they donate them to charity. So she started a business called Wild and Wacky Pets. She collects all these used stuffed animals, and she'll wash them and dry them and make them look as good as new. And then she literally rips off their heads and sews them back on different bodies. Look at this. This is a pig head on a giraffe body. How cool is that? But who else but a 12-year-old kid would think of it?
Yeah.
And so these girls are incredible, and that's one of the things that I love the most is that we get to share the stories of these girls and hopefully inspire even more of them to start their own businesses.
Wonderful. And because your brand is so focused and so clear, this probably gives you an opportunity to reach out to organizations and have, donate books if you want, but also create what are called special sales opportunities, where you're partnering with an organization to give away a bunch of books to their members or whatever it is. So can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things that's really important is publishers expect authors to basically do the bulk of the marketing for their book. I mean, it's important to be able to sell your book, and that's why they always say, what's your platform, and how many social media followers, and those sorts of things. And so for me, my book is about empowering girls and getting girls interested in entrepreneurship. And so I've worked with female founder groups where I'll do a mother-daughter events for them. There are a ton of kids entrepreneurship camps and after-school programs and those sorts of things. I work with them across the country. There are kids business fairs that I've worked with. And then Girl Scouts. One of the first entrepreneurial experiences of so many girls is selling cookies. And so I've worked with probably over 300 Girl Scouts across the country where the girls will read the Startup Squad and then then we'll talk to them about the lessons in the book and relate it to cookie sales. And what we found is the girls are more excited about selling, they're more engaged in selling, they do a better job. And they also realize that they're not just selling cookies, they are actually running a small business. So, you know, if anyone out there is the parent of a Girl Scout or a troop leader, you know, send me email at info@thestartupsquad.com, and we'll try to get some resources to you, because it's
Nice.
it's a great program.
That's awesome. So if you were an author wanting to set up something like that, if you're self-published, it's easy because you can do whatever you want with your books. Going through a big publisher like Macmillan, do you set up the opportunity and then contact the publisher and say, we need books sent over here, or how does that work?
What a lot of times we'll do is have the like if I'm talking to a group, I will have the group. I'll put them in touch with Macmillan's sales. They've got their own sales departments and they've got order forms, and so I'll just put them in touch, and they can order the books directly from Macmillan, just to take me out of the loop. There are certainly authors that buy books in bulk and then will resell them to these groups, and that's certainly, you know, it's a great way to make additional money. It's just a little bit more work. But that's usually the way that I will do it is, and the nice thing is you know, the books are paperback books with an $8 cover price, and Macmillan in bulk will sell them for, you know, close to half of that.
Great.
And so it's a relatively inexpensive way to take care of the books, but I'll just put them directly in touch with Macmillan. Some people will just buy from their local bookstore or go online or whatever it happens to be.
So you can arrange a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Great.
And well, sorry, let me just add just to that same point. So, you know, what I would say to aspiring authors or authors out there, think about how you can, what are the groups that would be very interested in your story. So if one of your characters is a foster kid, reach out to foster organizations and say, hey, I've got this character that's a foster kid, and see if they'll do a program with you. If your book takes place in Tennessee, go to the Tennessee companies that are based in Tennessee, or the Tennessee Tourist Bureau, and say, hey, I've got this great thing. And so try to think about what are the groups that might be particularly interested in different pieces of your book, and you might have a connection to, and then reach out to them and see if you can do an event with them.
Great. Well, let's take a few questions here, and if you have a question for Brian, please put it in the Q&A box. That way I can keep track. So Jeanette asks, what about older girls? Would they benefit from these books, or would they think they are too simple?
Well, a couple of things. It depends upon the reading level. I think, you know, this is technically for 8 to 12-year-olds, but I've worked with anywhere from 7 to 15-year-olds. It depends upon the reading level, but I think also the lessons in the back are applicable to anything. As I said, so in the second book, we cover negotiation, customer service, pricing, revenue, and profit. For pricing, the way it works is I write the back matter of all those tips, and then I go out to experts. So the revenue and profit section, I had the former CFO of Coca-Cola take a look at it and give me notes.
Wow.
For the negotiation section, I had a professor of negotiation from Columbia University give me notes. For the customer service section, I had the president of First Republic Bank, who is known for their customer service, give me notes. And so I think for older kids, as long as they put themselves in the mindset of, you know, hey, these are about 6th grade girls, I'm not the target market, I think they can certainly get something out of the book, and the lessons in the back are applicable to anything.
Great. How did you get these people to give you notes? Did you just contact them, or did you already know them from your previous business connections?
Definitely a combination. Some of them I had, I'm trying to think of where I got the first one from, but I know, for example, the woman who's the former CFO of Coca-Cola, I just sent her a note on LinkedIn, total cold email, and I absolutely did not expect anything back. And I just said, would you help me inspire and empower girls and teach them a little bit about finance? And she's like, I'd love to. And others were obviously connections as well. And there are some people, like right now I'm working on book 3. And so I've got in my mind some people that I want to reach out to. And so I'm going through LinkedIn and Facebook and other places and seeing, you know, who can give me a warm introduction to those people.
all you can do is ask,
Yeah,
and you never
yeah,
know. And I imagine this is the kind of request these people don't get a whole lot of.
yeah.
And to them, it sounds like a great project to be a part of.
And it's the ability to give back, of course, to the next
Yeah.
generation. So yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Carol asks, do you think business, so the whole concept of business, has a home in picture books as well as these, chapter books or middle grade novels? Do you think you can teach some of these skills to even younger kids?
Uh, Not only can you, but I would point everyone towards a fantastic book that does exactly that. That's written by, a sort of a very well-known, co-authored by a very well-known person in the publishing industry, Emma Dryden.
Right.
And Emma and Rana Diorio wrote a book called What Does It Mean to Be an Entrepreneur? And it's a picture book. And I think it is such a good example of what it really means to be an entrepreneur, the best I've ever read, that when I have friends who start their own businesses, I send them that picture. So absolutely. Sheila Bair, the former chairwoman of the FDIC, wrote a business picture book. I can't remember the name right now, but no, absolutely. I think obviously you have to be very simple with your concept, but there's unquestionably a market for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly the idea of working it into fiction and then having some back matter would be appealing to the picture book.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Great. Sheila asks, all your focus groups with so many girls who read your manuscript, how did you set that up?
Well, it helps having girls that used to be in my target demographic in my house. So a lot of it started with their friends. And I was very careful. I talked to the parents and I said, don't tell them that I wrote it, because I didn't want them to feel bad about telling Mr. Weisfeld didn't like the book, right? That's not going to be helpful to me. Girl Scout troops. I had my daughter was in the Girl Scouts. And then I also reached out to just like other local Girl Scout troops. And I said, would they be willing to read this? And I created just a 2-page survey that I put in the back of the book, and all the girls would read the book and then they'd fill out the survey and give me their feedback. And to say to a kid, hey, especially an avid reader, can you help me make my book better? Can you help me shape this into a better book and give me feedback? I mean, very few kids are going to say no to that. Right. So you can reach out to your local schools. You can reach out to the local libraries. I'm sure they can put you in touch with kids that can do it.
Okay, great. Robin asks, if I want to do a series, how many stories should I have, or should you sort of have in mind, at least when you're proposing it to a publisher or an agent?
Well, there's different types of series, right? You can do there's that one, if you think of like a Harry Potter where there's a continuous story going all the way through, ours is a new adventure every time. And so I think what they're going to want to know is how many books could it be? I don't think you necessarily can go in and say, I want to sell you a 10-book series, right? You got to sell them one book. And then you can say, this has the opportunity to be a series. But you have to start with that line. And I see in the chat, and I saw in the Q&A as well, just a question about boys and girls. And so one of the things I wanted to be clear about is I did this for my daughters, right? I did this with girls in mind. I wanted this to be something that they had, but it didn't exist, so I had to create it myself. But there's nothing anti-boy about what we do. We describe ourselves as girl-targeted, but boy-inclusive. And when I speak at libraries and schools and all those things, I speak on a co-ed basis. I just speak about the importance of entrepreneurship. I think, frankly, it's as important for boys to read about girls as entrepreneurs as it is for girls. So there's nothing anti-boy about it other than the fact that it's got girl characters. But there's certainly no reason why boys couldn't read this book and get as much out of it as girls could.
Great. Robin asks, what age are series really for? She says, is it only middle grades? Certainly chapter book, middle grade, young adult, you can have series. Picture books, you can have series. I think it's harder to sell the concept of a picture book series to a publisher. In my experience, I think you're right. You're really selling them one book, especially if it's not a straight nonfiction series. Nonfiction is different, but to something like you're doing, I I think, like you said, you sell them the one book and they see that it has the potential to become a series. Because picture books are so expensive for publishers to produce, they might not want to commit to 3 or 4 books at once. But what is your thought? What are your thoughts on that?
I think for a picture book, the key would be to create a character
Mm-hmm.
that could be in multiple books, right? I mean,
Yes.
I'm thinking of Curious George off the top of my head. I'm sure Curious George didn't go in and say, I'm going to write 150 books, but they
Right.
said, I'm going to create this really, fun story about this curious monkey. And so if you've got a character that can then go into multiple things, that would be the way to sell a series. Not selling a series, but selling a book that obviously has potential to use those characters in other stories.
Mm-hmm. And also the concept your series is built on is a very appealing hook, and it's very open-ended. So you can have lots of different businesses being created during lots of different plots in this book. So it has the potential to be a 50-book series if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I had mapped out, and I haven't looked back at the list, but I think I had mapped out the business lessons I wanted to include in like the first 20 books. And then it's just a matter of weaving those into the story, and the fact that we've got the 4 characters. We're doing it sort of a la the Babysitter's Club, where each book has a primary protagonist. Yeah, it could be an infinite series.
Right. Do you come up with the business concept first and then create the plot around that?
So one of the first things I did was I wanted to make sure that the business concept sort of took kids through the path of becoming an entrepreneur. And I also didn't want to make it too confusing for them. It's like one of the big important things is if you're starting a business, it should be something that you're interested in, right? Mm-hmm. If you hate cats, don't start a cat business. You're not going to be as excited about it. But what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to put that in the first book, because I didn't want a kid to finish it and say, oh, that sounds interesting. What business should I start? The first book, they run a lemonade stand. Because it's easy. We even include the recipe for lemonade in the back of the book. I did a lot of research on that, by the way, to pick the best recipe. And so that was the idea, is just, so the lessons were very clearly mapped out about how I wanted them to be. And so the way we approach each of the next books is who's the primary protagonist, who's the secondary protagonist. And then, yes, what are the business lessons that we want to weave into that book? And then we start to create the story. A little bit of the story around it. Some of it is easy. Marketing, you can make any story around it, but I want to make sure that as we start to think about the plot, we have those parameters of what we want to include in there, so we know how we want to work them into the story.
Sure. And also you have to know your audience really well, because you want to have them creating businesses in the books that the readers think are really cool businesses. They can see themselves maybe wanting to create a business like that. So I think, getting back to that, knowing your reader, knowing what they want from you, I think is so important.
Yeah, and just on that, it's always accessible. I wanted it to be something that a kid could close the book and do that same business. I didn't want it to be some fancy something or other that they need to learn how to code or whatever it is.
Right.
First book is a lemonade stand. The second book, they make t-shirts. The third book, which we're working on right now, we actually have the kids doing separate businesses. But one of the primary protagonists is going to be doing invitations for a wedding, and then the wedding planner gets sick, and so she gets sucked into being the wedding planner for this wedding. So it's a great premise, and we're excited about that.
Yeah. But yes, very doable businesses, because I remember, when my son was young, he wanted to start a business with his friends. It was like, Mom, we need $100 to start this business. Like they'd always think big, and the first thing they needed was capital. And, you want them to start businesses that are, like you said, doable, that don't require an enormous investment, that they can actually accomplish.
Yeah, but interestingly, so my daughter was the co-head of her school's climate change awareness club, and so she wanted to enter a booth into the local farmers market or local art fair to raise money for her club, but she had to come up with $100 to pay the initiation fee. So she and her friends started a lemonade stand. That they actually were one of the booths at my book launch. And by selling lemonade, they raised $100 to be able to start that next business.
There you go.
So even if a kid has a big idea, that's great. and they can just start small and generate the money for
Yep.
themselves to
Yep.
pay for it.
Great. Great. So anything to keep them from going in mom's wallet is a great idea.
Yeah.
Nancy asked, do you have any tips on creating teacher guides to go with your book?
Yeah, so actually for our teacher's guide, we worked with a entrepreneurship group, an entrepreneurship school based out in Cleveland, that they helped us with it. And so interestingly, I've just finished making the discussion questions for the third book, which comes out in May. For teachers, it's a couple of things. One is discussion questions that they could work with their kids, an activity that they can do with their kids that based upon the book. I think again, because again, you can combine an activity with literacy, that's great. And then I think it has to have that common core alignment. And I don't know, I certainly don't know how to do that, but there are people that do. And I think those are the sort of the three key elements. And we, as I said, I don't have much to say because we did bring in a partner to do that through Macmillan and this other group.
Great. Well, and you can go on his website and see the teacher guide.
We have the teacher's guide there, and we converted it into a parent's guide as well.
Nice, nice. Sheila asks, how did you get started working with the Girl Scouts? She says she worked there for 10 years and developed cookie sales and entrepreneurship and literacy badges. So very, very cool. But she said your approach sounds so casual. How do you kind of find your way into working with some of these big organizations?
So I think in some organizations, it's easier to start small. So I started my first year, I did 2 troops. I did my daughter's troop and I did a friend's troop in Palo Alto. And then we saw the results and it worked really well. So the next year I had someone introduce me to the woman that runs basically all the Girl Scout troops for our town. And they said, great. And so we did it. We did a program, I think, with 12 troops then. And then the following year, I wanted to expand it a little bit because I wanted to bring a little bit more mentorship and role models into it. And so I'm a University of Michigan grad. I reached out to just cold email the woman that runs programming for the Girl Scouts of Ann Arbor. And I said, hey, I did this great program there. I would love to do a program in Ann Arbor. And I'd love to, instead of having me teach the kids, let's get some female MBA students from the University of Michigan. And so she's like, yeah, that's great. And so then I sent a note I found the women's group at the University of Michigan. And I said, would anyone like to mentor these young girls? And I think I was looking for 25 female MBA students to be Girl Scout mentors. And after less than 24 hours, I had to shut it down and say, we've already had enough. So start small and show results. And then you can go to, because it's very different to say to someone, hey, can you go and buy my book? Versus, hey, I think my book can help you meet your goals. Do you want to try to do it together?
It's, again, that's that business mindset. You're telling them the benefit. You're showing them the benefit of working with you.
Yeah. And what can I do? Not what can I do for you? Not what can you do for me?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I've had several questions here asking if you see any other holes in the market with, great ideas that could be filled. Or, how do you keep your antenna up for great ideas, especially if you're really approaching it from this sort of business mindset like you do?
My favorite song lyric of all time is from the songs Scarlet Begonias by the Grateful Dead. And the lyric goes, once in a while you get shown the light in the strangest of places if you look at it right. And that's the idea that inspiration can just come from anywhere. You just have to be paying attention. I was laying in bed reading books with my girls on a Sunday morning when I had this idea. I wasn't, I wasn't sitting saying, okay, let me try to think of my great idea. It just happened. And I know that's difficult because then how do you, so how's that going to help me? And I think the answer is just, you always have to keep your eyes and ears open and just be paying attention and looking for different things. You just never know what's gonna happen. It's funny, actually. I said to Macmillan, I wanted that lyric to be the dedication in the first book, and they were like, "No, it's too heavy for middle grade."
I don't think so. I think
So
they would
yeah,
appreciate
it's a good. We'll see if we can slip it into one of the books somewhere down the
Yeah,
road.
for sure, for sure. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end for tonight. Uh, so on that inspiration uh, and letting it find you in the strangest of places. So thank you, Brian. This has been really, really great. You've given us so much great information, and I just wish you the best of luck with what you're doing. I just think it's amazing. And, if you come up with another great idea, I hope you come back on and tell us about it.
Well, as I said, Children's Book Insider was one of the many inputs that helped me learn this industry and learn how to write. And that 4-year journey, to create this series, um, in a big part, was helped by the Children's Book Insider. So I'm
Oh,
thankful to you for doing it. And I'm also, I've also been, one of the people on the other side of these calls trying to learn and take notes. And so I'm always happy to try to help those, because the only reason why I'm here is because people help me as well.
oh, well, thank you. This is why we have the best subscribers in the world. So great. Well, thank you again. It's been great. The chat box is blowing up with lots of wonderful comments here. You've inspired a lot of people tonight. So
Thank you.
yeah, and thank you all for being with us tonight. And we will see you next Thursday on our next distancing social. So have a good evening, everybody.